You are a snake. You are a rat. You are a fraud. You are a backstabber. You are a handbiter. You are a disgrace. And I don't know if it's his personal life. I don't know if it's stuff he's smoking. But I've seen a lot of people get paranoid, you know, that smoke pot and go nuts. But, I mean, I can just tell you this right now, that I'm not here to be shit on or stabbed in the back. This crew isn't your punching bag, and we did nothing to you but be loyal. And your little 5-hour extravaganza of little puppy dog that doesn't know why, and he just wanted to come back and shake my hand. He starts talking to me like he's literally a pimp, and I am a crack whore. He's like, here's how it's going to be. I'm leaving. And blah, blah, blah. Well, what's the problem? What's the thing? Well, I mean, what can we do? I mean, you know, I don't understand. He's like, well, it's just gone on too long and whatever. But I'll tell you this, if you're really desperate, you can pay me more money. But I'll tell you this, I'm going to promote my new show on Infowars. And I went, which again, I'm not even against him having a show. If he was nice, I was just like, it was just kind of like, I was like, well, I said, you know, in the bankruptcy stuff, I can't really give you a raise. But I said, that's okay, Owen. He goes, well, you know what? You know, it's a favor for you. I'll come in and do a week. And I'm like, no, that's okay, Owen. That's fine. I wish you well.
All right, guys. So, for a lot of people that watch alternative media, obviously, Alex Jones, a household name, and his protege, Mr. Owen Schroyer, have separated. They've made separate ways. And a lot of sparks of controversy, as you can see here. Alex Jones is rather pissed. This comes the day after Owen Schroyer's X. He went live on X for about 5 hours, okay? And he had a 5-hour rant. And one of the things that he brought up, there's a couple different things I thought were pretty interesting here. He brought up the fact that he's currently going through a lawsuit himself and has not been able to disclose the lawsuit at all on air. So I don't know exactly what is going on there, why he's not being allowed to talk about that. But let's ask Grok. Let's see what Grok says specifically as to why Owen Schroyer left. Because none of us are going to spend 5 hours listening to Owen Schroyer talk about this. By the way, he was raising money for his new network that he's hoping to launch by October 6th. So anyways, based on Owen Schroyer's broadcasts and surrounding discussions, key reasons for leaving Infowars include disagreements over content, example on Israel, a shift in the organization's direction towards monetization over mission, and personal factors like ethics misalignment, family time, and seeking new opportunities. He may revisit in the future. Well, that doesn't look very likely, considering the reaction I just showed you of Alex Jones. Okay, now let's talk about a couple of the key splits and things that have been going on. Personally, I used to listen to Alex Jones. He's been ahead of the curve on a lot of different things. He was one of the very first people outwardly speaking against the vaccine. He literally discussed, basically predicted 9/11. The guy's definitely been ahead of the curve on a lot of things. Obviously, he has the Sandy Hook controversies, and that was pretty messed up. I'm not gonna lie. But let's look at something recently that he'd said that kind of drove me nuts. All right, we're gonna hop on the side screen over here. Somebody else, a YouTube channel called The Yellow Brick Road, got this little clip of Alex recently.
Now, I don't like any of these wars. Not Gulf One, not Gulf Two, not Afghanistan, all of it. I'm against all these wars, Ukraine war, all of it.
Oh, wow, okay.
But if you look at U.S. doctrine and wars that we fought before that were right, it's in Latin America. This is our sandbox.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right.
And Venezuela is a communist dictatorship with the biggest oil reserves per square foot in the world. Their people are absolute slaves. And I don't like regime change. But they are manipulating our elections. They are flooding us with fentanyl.
Oh.
And if there were surgical strikes to take out the communists, there'd be an uprising and they could have elections and it would be a good thing.
Okay.
So, I'm not one to ever push offensive stuff, but they started it, so it's really defense.
All right.
What now, guys?
So there's a pretty big example of something that I'd imagine Owen Schroyer would probably be very against, that Alex Jones has said recently. One of the patterns that really has pushed me away from Alex Jones in particular, and really just Infowars at large, is something else that Owen Schroyer discussed. It was the constant fire sale going out of business sale model, that every moment was the very end, and it really kind of just got old. You know, that, and also probably the biggest thing that's been a major turnoff, and I could see this is a rift between Alex Jones and Owen Schroyer, was really the sentiment towards what has been going on with the Trump administration at large since they've gotten in power here in 2024 or 2025. So there's been a huge rift, and Alex has made some criticisms against the control of the Mossad and the CIA and the involvement and the cover-up of Jeffrey Epstein, right? But not like Owen Schroyer. And so you hear a lot of what Owen Schroyer said, and then we're going to go back over here, and here's a little clip of Owen Schroyer.
Taking a lot more time off. Specifically, you may have noticed how on Thursday I walked off the show mid-show. It was about an hour into the show. And just so you understand what happened, and if you watched the Infowars War Room, you've seen this before, so it's not like it's anything new, but, Alex was disrupting the show, and he wanted me to cover something, and he wanted me to get a guest on. I'm in the middle of the show while it's going on, as you see so many times, and it just didn't go well. I kind of just reached my point of no return, and so I just walked off the studio. Now, I will say, it was a little upsetting to me that he went on and said that I had a family emergency. I did not have a family emergency. There was no family emergency. I didn't appreciate people reaching out to me thinking that something bad had happened, including my own parents. So there was no family emergency.
It's a family emergency. You had to leave. Imagine getting a call from your own mother. What happened? Is everything okay? Yeah, no, he just lied and said it was a family emergency because he tried to step all over my segment, so I quit. He said it's a family emergency.
Walked off the show. I've never done that before in my life.
I've recently come to learn that a lot of founders and marketers don't quite know how to look up the...
Okay, so there right there is just a small taste of what I'd imagine it must be like working for Alex Jones. He's become quite the Trump cheerleader, for one, and he is vehemently opposing this narrative that he was, let's just say, censoring. And maybe in all technicality, he wasn't censoring. One of the other things that Alex Jones said was Owen Schroyer had said that he wasn't given a raise since 2018. Alex Jones, in Alex Jones fashion, has said that he has paper in his hand right here that shows that that Owen Schroyer has gotten 3 raises since 2018 and has had his salary almost doubled if you include bonuses. Okay. This is something that I remember as somebody that watched Alex Jones quite regularly that always frustrated me so much about Alex. Alex always has the paper right here, but he never shows the paper. He never shows the paper. And this past, I don't know, 6 months or so since Trump has gotten in office, I've seen him dodge so much of the major talking points that somebody I would consider anti-establishment, pro-Constitution should be having if they're ideologically consistent, okay? Trump's attack on freedom of speech, his revocations of legitimate citizen, visas here for education due to people's outwardly spoken views on Israel, which is not even our country, okay? We're not Israel. You should be able to openly criticize another nation in here. This is supposed to be the land of the free. We live in a captured country, one that is literally funding a genocide right now. And this whole idea that Owen Schroyer is being too negative, okay? It's really a joke, because every single bit of the high ground that myself, many independently minded individuals had used the narratives, assuming that he was at least going to stand by, in principle, much of what he said he was going to be doing. He garnered support in Michigan from the Muslim population, saying that he would ensure that there was a ceasefire agreement. He always discusses how the evil Democrat mob is here to take away your freedom of speech and censor you. He always claimed he was going to be the anti-war candidate. And he's still currently, right now as we speak, trying to garner a literal Nobel Peace Prize. The delusion, as we are the only nation on earth, besides Israel, involved in a literal genocide, we are funding it, we are opposing the United Nations ceasefire pressures and the ICJ's war crimes declarations. We are sitting there vetoing all of this. An international war criminal. Our country is captured by another nation, okay? One that Israel, and I've shown this in my last episode if you haven't looked, Israel. I'm just going to say it again, okay? Why is it such a big deal? We've lost every bit of our high ground in the international stage due to our undying support of Israel. They would not be able to do what they're doing right now if it wasn't for us. And we've literally bombed Iran in support of Israel when we were in the middle of ceasefire talks with Iran, while Israel violated it. We were being dog-walked by another nation. So this whole idea that you could just be too negative about Trump. What are we supposed to do? Cheerlead him while he is the antithesis of the entire ideological foundation that he was elected upon? I don't understand how there's such thing as too negative about Trump right now. Frankly. How is it that our nation has become the epitome of evil empire? We are literally arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine, the Azov Battalion, and Zionist, radical, semi-fascist, full-blown, ethnic cleansing, ethno-supremacist Israelis in Gaza who are doing things like killing journalists, not allowing the Western media in there, not allowing any free press in there. The few Palestinian journalists that are there being murdered at mass. This is all out in the open now. How is there such thing as too negative on Trump right now? If we are to be taking advantage of the freedom of speech that we have left, the minimal shreds of it, we should be holding the politicians that we elected accountable. That should be our number one priority. Obviously, as you could see, Alex Jones here is trying to make excuses for for war with Venezuela right now. Like that's going to end up good. So I don't really care about those minimal, about the details there, about if he got a raise or not. You know, look, he did walk off. He walked off on Thursday, mid-segment, was rather irritated. It appears that Alex Jones was trying to come in and take over the segment or have him do something different, even though he totally doesn't censor. Look, the difference might be a little bit of what you would consider semantics here. Because when somebody's breathing down your shoulder and saying, hey, you're being too negative, are they saying, no, you can't talk about that? Not explicitly. But implicitly, is there an implication there that you need to kind of change topics and keep it on, we're winning, we're doing this for freedom? Anyways, Owen Schroyer, we wish you the best of luck, and your criticism of Israel, your criticism of the Trump administration is needed right now. We need more people out there right now. In fact, let's take a quick little look. I think you guys would be rather entertained here. We'll hop back on here. Look. So here's a little bit more of the comments. Okay. Here's one. Not gonna lie, just constructive criticism. But it became hard to watch you because you've become so cynical and so negative. I know you've been put through the ringer, and so I appreciate and respect patriots like yourself and others that have been persecuted. But damn, I had to stop the war room and I couldn't watch you anymore because it was just so fucking negative on your end. I'm just listening while you're saying this, and he said you're too negative, and I gotta be honest, Alex is right. You are so negative and a downer. It's like you can't see all of the positive things happening too. I don't say this to pile on you or to be an asshole, but I really enjoyed watching your show for a while. But like a couple months ago, I don't know, when the switch flipped, probably when the Jeffrey Epstein list was, we were told that Jeffrey Epstein, the whole entire thing was a scam, didn't exist, that there was no clients. There's so much here, okay? Anyways, look, that's just one, and then we got some other ones. Look, the Lion of Judah. Look at this guy, the Lion of Judah. You are cursed. I told you when you started to viciously attack Israel and the Jews that you will soon fall, but God will also judge you unless you repent. Of course, big Israel flag there. Look. there's obviously something going on with Infowars. I think they're getting funded. I think they're getting money from people that are telling them not to cover Israel negatively. Something's going on there. But I don't know. A lot of it's speculation. But I can give you many examples of how Alex Jones in this past few months has really become an excuse maker. Hey, look at this. Hey, let's focus on the positive. When really he should be pelting. When the high ground is completely demolished and everything, the core principles that we elected Trump on are disregarded, and on an international stage, we lose every ounce of credibility of being a just nation. So, that's my rant on that. Let's do a little update on what's going on over here. We got the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. Actually, you know what? We're going to hop on here. I'm going to show you.
Every day, the Young Turks delivers 2 hours.
Check this one out. Here we go. I wanted to watch
It is
this.
not easy to get a 5 to 9 without first crushing your 9 to 5. The truth is, I was.
If your goal is to be 65 and sitting on a beach for the rest of your life doing nothing, the social science tends to say that's not very good for you. You actually should be involved in your community and get involved and still have a side job and all the rest of that. But if we really believe that we can't raise the retirement age and we're never going to change that, we will go bankrupt.
You know, that super sexy debate over what contributes more to our national debt came up during my appearance on CNN last night. Ben Shapiro thinks we need to raise the retirement age to 110 years old because Social Security, of course, is bankrupting the country. But I disagreed. I actually blamed a different reason for our growing U.S. debt. I focused on military interventions, endless foreign aid, and involvement in conflicts abroad that, you know, we spend a lot of money on and don't have pay-fors baked into. So I'll make my case a little better after we hear more from Ben Shapiro. Take a look.
All the talk about cutting at the margins, you know, whatever Doge is doing, that's not going to touch the real driver of the systemic debt in the United States. Women are living to 85 if you make it to 65. Men are living to 83 if you make it to 65. That's 20 years on the public dime.
When you're talking, hold on. When you're talking about the government paying, you're talking about Social Security,
Yes.
which is people's money.
Well, it is not the money you paid in.
It's the system that they pay into.
Well, no,
Your every paycheck stub.
yes, but believe me, I pay a lot in
I
my
know I pay into Social Security. I don't know about
I promise you, the amount that people are taking out is not the amount that is going in, which is why we are going bankrupt.
Okay. So I've been advised by Ben to look at a chart of our national debt. And I'm going to do that in a minute. But before I do, Cenk, what are your thoughts on what Ben Shapiro had to say? People are living a little longer, right? And it is true that the amount of revenue that goes into the Social Security Trust isn't enough to cover the benefits, right? We do borrow a little bit every year as a result of that. Now, there's a fix to it, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a lot of misdirection here, guys. I'll talk about the retirement age after we fix the bare minimum fixes that are super easy, actually. Okay, so number one, when they say, oh, look, we're raising the retirement age, not because we want to take more of your money and make sure that you can't take that money out and give it, we want to give it to rich people and tax cuts and corporations and subsidies and foreign governments. No, it's because we want you to have time to get involved in the community. That's not why. That's hilarious, okay? You can get involved in the community any way you like, and bless your heart, and I heard that discussion you guys had, and I encourage it, right? But that has nothing to do with what age we should set, because if they move it from, let's say, 65 to, make up a number, 69, right? So those are 4 years you would not get benefits. That is stealing from you every single year, a significant amount of money. It has nothing to do with what you're gonna do at the community center. And then when he says going bankrupt, wait, what does he mean? Does he mean Social Security going bankrupt or the budget itself, the entire country going bankrupt? Because those are two separate issues. As we're about to tell you, fixing Social Security is actually Very simple.
Like shockingly easy.
Yes, and that's not going bankrupt at all if we do that one easy fix. And then in terms of the country, that's a larger conversation and one I'm thrilled to have. And we should have all those conversations before we get to moving the retirement age.
Okay, so I responded to what Shapiro said there. So I want to go to that moment, and then we'll break it down further.
I just totally reject what you just said about how we're going bankrupt due to Social Security. Really, you don't think like the trillions of dollars we've spent on wars in the Middle East might have something to do with that?
It is not even
our
remotely a
national
percentage
debt.
what we spend on Social
our national
Security.
debt shot up significantly after 9/11, after we started invading countries in the Middle East.
You should look at a chart of
Now
the
we're at
national
30.
debt.
So it's kind of hard to hear because we're talking over each other, but he said at the very end, you should look at a chart of our national debt. And I took his advice, so let's take a look at a chart of the national debt and see where it's shot up. Oh, wow, would you look at that? Using data from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, this chart shows how U.S. spending, or I should say the debt, really shot up exponentially beginning in the early 2000s. Gee, I wonder what happened then. So the last time the United States, by the way, had a budget surplus, not a deficit, not a debt, budget surplus, was when President Bill Clinton was leaving office in 2000 and George W. Bush was coming in. So obviously Social Security wasn't bankrupting the country. We weren't dealing with debt at that point, and Social Security was already, a well-established, program. So what changed in the early 2000s? What could it have been? Well, here's Senator Bernie Sanders. This is a speech he gave on the Senate floor in 2012, basically taking us down a trip, or taking us on a trip down memory lane. Take a look.
President Bush assumed office, and within a few years, we were fighting not just one war in Afghanistan, but another war in Iraq. And many of the deficit hawks today, the people who tell us, oh, gee, we've got to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and nutrition and education. We got to cut. When asked to pay for those wars, they had nothing to say. Nobody knows exactly how much these two wars will end up costing, but the guess is that by the time we take care of the last veteran 70 years from now, those wars may run up over $3 trillion, and we did not pay for them to the tune of 1 penny.
So understand what Senator Sanders is saying there. He's saying, look, we just keep engaging in conflict abroad, starting wars in the Middle East. There are no pay-fors. We are literally borrowing money to do this. And that is why when you look at a chart of our national debt, you will notice our national debt skyrockets beginning in the early 2000s. This is not rocket science, okay? It really isn't.
Here's another good point, too, okay? I think it's really important to consider where that money gets allocated after it's been used. People have Social Security. What are they using that money for? They're using it for groceries, bills. They're using it for rent. They're using it to stay afloat and survive. All that money is going back into the American ecosystem. So, Social Security continues to be used within the ecosystem of American economics. Where does this money go when we have foreign wars? Something that I'm sure Ben Shapiro doesn't want to talk about, kind of like how he's so happy to not discuss what happened with the Jeffrey Epstein list, and how he totally buys the entire narrative that that whole thing's a big Democrat hoax. We're spending that money, and where does it go? It goes to military contractors. It goes to killing people abroad. Maybe it yields us cheaper gas. I don't know. Definitely, we definitely increased opium and heroin production in Afghanistan during that war. That's one thing we sure did do. And, that just happened to coincide with the entire heroin epidemic, which has now led to the fentanyl epidemic. Anyways, so that's what we got out of that war. And Iraq, obviously, we all know about the fake weapons of mass destruction lie, something propagated by none other than our best buddy, Bibi Netanyahu, the true leader, the dictator of America. We love Bibi Netanyahu. And I'm sorry, I'm being too negative about Trump, huh? You know what? I'd imagine Alex Jones would probably be stepping in right now to talk about this. All right, so let's go ahead and we can continue that topic. But since we talked about all these wonderful foreign wars, let me get you guys a little update on what's happening with the whole situation with Venezuela. And here we are.
Military strike on this boat. You're going to see it get blown up. This is the footage of it. There it goes. It's been blown up out of the sky. No proof, no evidence has been shared that proves that these were the people that Donald Trump claims they were. But these were suspected drug smugglers. These were not terrorists or people we're at war with technically, right? These are drug cartel, supposedly, allegedly, drug cartel members of Tren de Aragua cartel in Venezuela. And this boat was off the shore of Venezuela in international waters, supposedly, allegedly, headed to the United States full of drugs. And instead of what normally happens, which is the DEA goes and arrests, raids the boats and takes all the drugs and arrests all the people. And instead of doing that, Donald Trump instead ordered a U.S. military strike. This is the first time this has ever happened. This has never been done before. Normally, we actually take these people in. They stand trial. We actually collect the evidence that they were drug smugglers. We find the drugs. And instead, this is an unprecedented move that escalates this kind of war on drugs. I mean, we've been in this war on drugs for a long time. And this certainly has escalated the war on drugs to an actual war. So this is causing a lot of alarm and concern. A lot of people are calling this out, saying, hey, shouldn't there have been some due process for these people? How do you know for sure that they were drug smugglers? Do you have evidence of the drugs? Do you have evidence of these individuals being members of that cartel? Do you have evidence that this boat was actually headed to the United States? Like, what in the world, where's the evidence that allowed you to just execute 11 people out of nowhere? Now, look, all of us want the drugs to stop flowing into the United States, right? I mean, I don't think any of us are thinking, yeah, it's fine, let the drugs just come flooding in. I think all of us are very upset about drugs flooding into the country. I think we're more upset about actual gang members flooding into the country and taking over apartment buildings or terrorizing American citizens. I mean, sure, terrorizing our neighborhoods. That is what we'd actually prefer to be cleaned up more than anything. Certainly, it would be great if Latin America, Central America could kind of get their shit together, quite frankly, and clean up the cartels and get rid of them and make their country safe. I mean, all of that would be great. But the question is the way to do this by executing people through ordering military strikes on them when it's drug smuggling? This isn't a...
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my video ad, where the purpose is quite simple. I want to entice you, coaches and service providers, to...
Even in a situation of terrorists saying, well, these are terrorists and we are at war with terrorism, and so we often drop bombs and drone terrorists, and oftentimes we end up blowing up civilians and children and women and kids on buses and wedding parties and people that absolutely did not deserve to be murdered at the hands of the United States or any other big empire just out of suspicion of being a terrorist. And many times we can confirm they're not terrorists. That's already a question of ethics. Should we be doing that? Should we be, it's like ridiculous we even have to ask the question, should we be bombing buses full of children? What do you think? Obviously no, but the war on terror, this has...
But we do, right? That's what we do. It's a part of our MO. Does America have any credibility on the international stage to be telling anybody what to do or what not to do anymore? Is that me being overly negative? when I say that. Like, at what point in this whole spectrum of the Overton window of what's acceptable to discuss and what's not, where does it become overly negative to just call out the situation as it is? Like, Trump said he was going to deport criminals, and instead I see videos of ICE beating up a little old lady on Hollywood Boulevard. Trump said that he was going to end the war in Ukraine. During the middle of peace talks, Ukraine bombs Russia. What do? We continue to fund them, even though they obviously did that to keep from having discussion of peace. And you know what's ironic about that is those precision strikes that were made, and we can go into the details of that. This is just a few months back. They had to have been executed using not just American missiles, but American intelligence was needed to pinpoint and direct this weaponry. At what point do we need to stop and look at the reality of this situation at large? And as much as we might gravitate towards some of the hyperbolic, in-your-face rhetoric, when it doesn't hold any water anymore, when do you stop cheerleading for this administration? When does it become your number one priority to just hold them accountable? I and many other journalists that I look up to hold no allegiance to the left, to the right, to any political entity or politician. I, like Kim Iverson, and not saying we agree on everything, Jimmy Dore, many others, we look, and this is the hallmark of whether or not you have credibility as a journalist to me, is A, you don't have an egoic attachment to your belief, okay? Meaning, if new evidence comes in and that evidence negates a view that you might have had previously, you are open-minded enough to go, okay, well, actually, with this new information that's come in, I now believe this. Or maybe even just saying, I was wrong. That view, it was wrong. I was misinformed. This need to have an egoic attachment to an ideology, but then you find that a lot of the times it's hypocritical because you're more rooting for the team than you are the principle itself. You're willing to be a complete hypocrite. You know, all of these arguments against against the Democrats using DEI politics and identity politics to make certain subsets of the population free from criticism. And all of the attacks on woke politics, for them to turn around and do what they've done with Columbia University and Harvard University regarding speech on Israel, which is ever evolving and very wide spectrum. Anti-Semitism equals criticism of a nation and a government is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It takes out, it deflates everything that administration says they stand for. I don't understand how people don't see this and call it out. It has to be a litmus test of what's considered principled journalism. Principled journalism. So here we go. We got Trump bombing, drone attacks on what he calls Tren de Agua, a supposed smuggling operation, and 11 people killed. I guess we'll hop back on here into the side screen and we will see a little bit more.
It's been allowed and excused, often debated, because the terrorists were violent and dangerous and killing people. So the excuse is it's either us or them, and war is ugly, and a lot of times civilians and innocents get caught in the middle of war, and it's just unfortunate. But at least the excuse was, well, but terrorists are dangerous and they're trying to kill you. They'll behead you. They'll murder you in a very frightening way. They'll cut your head off with a spoon. That's something extremely frightening. So do you want that? And everybody said, no, I don't want that. And so then we say, okay, then we're going to go ahead and use actual lethal force on these people and kill them. But when it comes to drug smuggling, yes, drugs kill people, but it's different. And we don't typically allow for lethal force when it comes to rounding up drug dealers. We don't say it's justified to shoot and kill them or justified to bomb them. So this is raising a lot of questions. Is this the direction we want to go in when it comes to the war on drugs? Are we going to be that country that if we just suspect you, because these people were not, they didn't get their due process. They didn't get any of that, right? Their boat was just blown up. We don't have any evidence. The White House has not provided any evidence that these were actual drug smugglers, that these were actual members of Tren de Aragua, that there was drugs on board this boat. We don't have any evidence of this. So are we comfortable with this new level of war on drugs and allowing the government to just murder people that they suspect?
You know what I think this is? I'm going to be honest with you. I think that they're using new AI technology, probably from Palantir. They got new drones. They're testing out equipment. They're testing it all out. They want to see how it works. They have issues with Venezuela. Not saying that Nicolas Maduro is a good guy, or even that I support the government of Venezuela. I do respect the autonomy of any and every nation on earth, and I do believe it should be our priority to leave them be. Now, of course, there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of different reasons why Trump has a major issue, and if you look, Venezuela had deported and sent a lot of their worst of the worst, their gang members, which took over apartment complexes in Chicago and in Denver, the famous Aurora, Colorado, apartment complex taken over by Tren de Agua. We had some in Texas. They sent the worst of their worst here. And this is supposedly the same gang, right? But when you look and you think about this in a big picture, it's extremely dangerous. It continues to perpetuate all the same criticisms that we had about Obama and what he'd done with all of his drone strikes and the 7 nations that were involved in drone strikes and regime change during his administration. It's being continued now using new technology, and due process is continuously swept under the rug. It's a dangerous place for America at large, especially when we sit as the main financing and backing entity to a nation that's committing open genocide that is not supported by any other nation on earth. This is crazy, absolutely crazy talk, okay? Anyways, I'm done with my rants on that. We'll go into another thing here. This is an interesting little thing.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, calm down. So this story that you wrote at Wired has been getting a lot of buzz, and it's justifiably, because it's pretty astounding. It's one of those stories that's like not surprising, but shocking that we actually have the evidence to prove the stuff that a lot of us have been thinking all along. And then there's another story on top of that story, which is the reaction to that, to your story. But before we get into that, just set up what this story shows and also how it started, like what made you write about it in the first place.
Totally. So I actually have been reporting on Chorus for a while. Chorus is this group co-founded by the YouTuber Brian Tyler Cohen. They sort of came on my radar right after the election. Obviously, Kamala Harris lost, and there was finally this recognition from the Democrats that they needed to embrace new media. And they kind of realized that they had a very failed media strategy and that she had failed to connect with voters. And so I was reporting on a lot of the fallout from that. And I noticed this big splashy profile in the New York Times of Chorus, written by Ken Bensinger, who's an amazing reporter at the Times. And it was talking about, hey, we're here to fix this Democratic messaging problem. We're gonna build this network. And Chorus quite literally, the name is all of these voices together in tandem, boosting Democrat messaging. That's how it was positioned. So it came onto my radar very quickly, and I started looking into them. I started following their website, et cetera, et cetera. Months later, I did a story about them where I reported on their fundraising decks, which somebody had sent me, where they had included a bunch of content creators that actually didn't want anything to do with them, that had nothing to do with them, including Kat Abugazaya and some others who were like, wait a minute, why am I being used to fundraise, and get this organization millions of dollars potentially? I'm not even part of it. So I wrote about that. And then a couple months ago, people reached out to me and said hey, have you heard about this new funding scheme? And I heard from the creators involved with the program who had themselves problems with the program and wanted to speak out and kind of wanted more transparency and wanted this program to be known. So the program itself is basically what we write about is this dark money group, the 1630 Fund, is secretly kind of funding high-profile Democratic influencers as part of this initiative. Influencers are getting up to $8,000 a month to promote the party line.
So there was a really, not surprisingly, very enthusiastic response to this. There was also a lot of upset, I would say, not surprisingly, in response to this. Before we get into that, though, tell us more about the 1630 Fund, the dark money group behind Chorus.
Yeah, so the 1630 Fund emerged. It really became really powerful after.
Okay, just a quick recap to fill in anybody, because I think a lot of context is being missed here, a lot of assumptions. Okay, so Taylor Lorenz, who is not my favorite journalist, but she exposed something that I think is very important to talk about, and she calls it the Dem-Fluencer scandal. Democratic influencers that consider themselves independent have been part of a coalition called Chorus. Chorus is also funded by a dark money group called the 1630 Foundation, and a part of their contract is that they are not to discuss this group at all. They're not to discuss where this money comes from. They basically assign some sort of almost like an NDA that excludes them from mentioning anything about where their funding comes from in this regard. And it has about 80 different influencers in it, all Democrats, that basically creates an Overton window as to what is acceptable narratives for these Democratic influencers. And it poses a major threat to what exactly independent journalism is, because we, as a society, look at people online. I mean, no different than me right now. Of course, I'm really small. I don't have any financing at all. I'm doing this for the love of the game. And I hope that I could, eventually find a way to monetize this without losing my integrity. But creating an Overton window with dark money so that all of these Democratic influencers are speaking the same narratives and avoiding other narratives. A part of this whole entire thing is that they're not allowed to criticize each other at all. And they basically have to go for these little groups where they talk and discuss what their objectives are and discuss, have these little meeting of the minds online where they discuss what their objectives are and what sort of topics they're going to talk about, and also get permission to speak about whatever sort of topics they want to talk about. So you're not an independent journalist if you're doing this. If you're partaking in this, you are just this microcosm of what the mainstream media beast exemplifies, right? So definitely a very dangerous precedent has been set in the independent media landscape for the Democratic influencers. All right, I'm going to let her continue. Hopefully, I'm sure she'll be getting into more about this.
Citizens United. So it's a sort of landmark decision back in, I think it was 2009 or 2010, and then a sort of a corollary decision that basically just gave birth to this massive dark money ecosystem that arose throughout the 2010s. Obviously, we're all familiar with Republican dark money groups, the Koch network, et cetera. The Republicans hopped into the dark money ecosystem very early, leveraged it, in regards to these influence campaigns very early. And Democrats are sort of sought to play catch up. So especially since 2018, in Trump's first presidency, the 1630 Fund has become this sort of like powerful, like liberal version of a lot of these conservative dark money groups. And Chorus is described in contracts that we viewed as a project of the 1630 Fund. So they're linked basically fiscally. And yeah, the goal is to, the 1630 Fund is a liberal entity, and their goal is to push Democrat type stuff.
Can you talk about the type of things that you looked at and that you had access to? Because I thought that was kind of fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously, I started by hearing from creators in this program. We talked to several creators in the program. We talked to people that were offered the deal. We got access to multiple copies of the contracts at different tiers of the program, recordings of an onboarding session, Zoom recordings, where the lawyer is actually quoted talking about how they don't need to worry about blah, blah, blah disclosure, things like that, which is in the article. And then we had screen recordings of group chats where the influencers are discussing the nature of the contract. We have emails between the company and the content creators themselves. We have an enormous amount of documentation and support for our story and the claims in it.
Right. So let's look at some of the reactions. And the first one I want to look at was from Brian Tyler Cohen. Tell us who Brian Tyler Cohen is, his relationship to this, and then we're going to watch his reaction to your story.
Yeah, Brian Tyler Cohen is one of the co-founders of Chorus. So he is the ringleader. He's like the most prominent. He's the face of this program, basically.
Okay, so let's take a look at this face and see what he has to say.
Lorenz says that the 1630 Fund is, quote, a powerful liberal dark money group. 1630 Fund is our fiscal sponsor. One of the largest documented donors to 1630 Fund is the same person funding Meteor's Reporters in Residence program, which Taylor Lorenz herself is a part of. And guess what her monthly stipend is? $8,000 per month. So she's criticizing an entity that is funded by someone that she is currently taking money from. I guess it's okay when Taylor Lorenz gets paid, but no one else.
All right.
Wow, that's not true. That's not accurate. Yeah, so what he's talking about, so first of all, we actually don't know that Pierre Omidyar is the biggest funder of the 1630 Fund. We don't know who funds the 1630 Fund. It could be foreign billionaires. We have no idea. The whole problem with dark money is that there's no disclosure. So sometimes billionaires that are interested in transparency, like Pierre Omidyar, will proactively disclose this information, or sometimes a journalist will figure it out. In this case, Pierre Omidyar, who's a billionaire who funds The Intercept, Honolulu Civil Beat, a bunch of journalistic endeavors,
Okay, another glaring hypocritical irony is that the left, they pride themselves on being anti-establishment, anti-billionaire, pro-middleman, pro-worker, pro-free thinking, yet here they are, allowing themselves to take money without even knowing where it's coming from and partake in Overton window. It's just the most glaring hypocritical thing that you could expect from the left, which has pushed many people like myself away from the establishment Democrat Party. Just an absolute joke. Just, you know, and the funny thing is they did the same exact thing with the Occupy Wall Street movement too. You know, it bothers me so much. What has happened with the left? You know, we have lost the plot. The left has lost the plot. The right has lost the plot. It's, you know, maybe it's just the signs of end-stage capitalism. Maybe it's just the folly of man that they'd be willing to sell their morals and their principles for the right price. You know, and $8,000 a month is the highest stipend that is being offered by Chorus, by the way. And for people like Brian Tyler Cohen, that's nothing. It's not even that much money. One criticism I've heard is that Brian Tyler Cohen has been very light in his coverage of the war in Gaza. Let's not call that the war in Gaza. I'm sorry. That's probably something he would say. The genocide going on in Gaza currently. Something you don't hear people say often when they're getting money from dark funds, like the 1630.
Gave, I think it was like something like $40 million to 1630 Fund back in, I think it was like 2020 or 2021. That's irrelevant. He can give all he wants to the 1630 Fund, just the way Lorraine Powell Jobs, you know, who owns The Atlantic, can give all the money she wants to dark money groups. That doesn't mean The Atlantic is somehow compromised. They're not receiving the money from dark money groups. So the Omidyar, you know, reporting fellowship that I'm under right now is completely funded by Pierre Omidyar. It has no dark money funding at all. And actually, because of this misinformation that people like Brian Tyler Cohen are spreading about this nonpartisan, non-political investigative journalism fellowship, they had to put out a whole press release saying not only have we never received money from 1630 Fund, we have no financial connection to any, you know, dark money groups. But this is just such a gross mischaracterization. And it's also just absurd if you follow that logic out. It's like, is the implication that like I'm also somehow taking money from the 1630 Fund, this dark money group that hates me? Like, and why would they be paying me to like report and write this like criticism, like this critical piece about their, like, what is it? Like, follow that logic and it makes no sense. But the whole thing is this intentional conflation with a political influence scheme and a nonpartisan, non-political investigative journalism fellowship. That is absurd. And I think it shows, frankly, how much they do not respect journalism.
Yeah, and also, like, do they think we're that dumb that we're going to fall for something like that?
A lot of people on TikTok are that dumb, unfortunately, and do fall for this.
Right. Or maybe that's a fair point. But also, like, the point is the disclosure, right? I mean, you
yes, that too.
Hide the fact that you're getting this, that you're part of this fellowship.
They issued a press release the day that I was accepted and the day that they announced it. Not only did I post it on all my channels, but they issued a press release announcing my name and the other journalists, who are some of the most amazing investigative journalists, as part of this program. And also, the funding, you know, information, the reason they know about this program is because everything is out on the website. We didn't have to sign any non-disclosures. It's all public. The problem with Chorus and the 1630 Fund program is that none of it was public. None of it was disclosed. So that's, you know, aside from the funding, which is a very different funding structure, they also didn't disclose it proactively.
Right, which is a big part of the story. Let's take a look at another attempt made by Brian to discredit you. This one was creative, and this is kind of typical, though, but let's take a look.
There are people like Taylor Lorenz who are desperate to tear the left apart, and in fact, it becomes clear who her efforts help when you hear stuff like this.
Genuinely, I kind of like Taylor Lorenz because I know that she actually believes what she says. You get what I'm saying?
So yeah, I generally don't align myself with friends of Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens.
Are you in a career you're unhappy with and you finally want to be able to chase your dreams?
I'm sorry about the ads, guys.
You're stuck because
I'm going to buy
Okay, so
YouTube
here
Premium.
he's saying that you are friends with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens because they said something about you that they genuinely like you. Now, first of all, I didn't watch that full clip, but I have a feeling they think you're kind of a nut job, right? When they say that you believe what you say.
They're making fun of the fact that I continue to acknowledge the ongoing COVID pandemic and the fact that our public health ecosystem is being dismantled. Like, I'm severely immunocompromised, and I've talked about how both political parties have, fed the destruction of public health and how we need to take layered precautions, including getting vaccinated and wearing masks, again, to prevent the spread of airborne disease, including COVID. And they're like mocking me for that and being like, wow, she's so crazy,
Yeah,
but at
she
least
is
she actually
crazy.
she actually believes in
Right.
COVID. That's
Yeah.
what they're
She's crazy for believing that. Okay, but we don't need to get into that right now. We don't need to get into that right now. Sorry, I just had to say that. It bothered me so much. Oh my God. She's a nut job. She's definitely a nut job.
mocking.
Genuine, right? She's giving you credit for being honest. I mean, they're giving you that, yeah, but they think you're crazy.
Well, also, like, let me just be clear. I've reported on both of these figures
Right.
extensively. Tucker Carlson engaged in such a public harassment and abuse campaign against me for years, to the point that my parents were swatted multiple times, had to leave their house in the middle of the night. Like, there are actual
sure that had
case
nothing to do
studies.
with it.
I think NYU did one, and Institute for Strategic Dialogue did another, but like the case studies of the vicious harassment that Tucker Carlson specifically has incited against me. So this idea, and I've never even met Candace Owens, in person ever. This idea that like I am friends with either of these people, both of whom I've reported on critically for years, and who have incited harassment campaigns against me, is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's also just ridiculous because, one, as you point out, it's like such a misleading, and I don't think anyone can watch that and actually think that you're chummy with them. But also, let's say, just for argument's sake, that you were. I mean, again, it's like a guilt by association. That has no effect on whether or not you were telling the truth in your reporting. But obviously, that's why, he's doing this, because he's not dealing with the substance.
That is a tool of somebody that's losing a narrative. They will always try and find ways to discredit you that really have absolutely nothing to do with the topic at hand. It's just a continuous propaganda scheme used to distract and negate the topic. It is a technique of losers. Anyways, that's it for me today. Hope you guys are all doing well. Thanks for watching Fear Porn, and have a good day. Bye.